This is TWiT. Nest. Now, I really want Stacey's take on this because she covers IoT. Ron Amadio wrote an article that might be, I think, considered by some a little bit...
Ditro?
Yeah.
He went a bit overboard.
Maybe he went a little bit overboard. So, in fact, Florence Ion said, I'm doing some research on this because I don't know if I buy it. He writes, Nest, the company, died at Google I/O 2019. The Nest ecosystem is dead. Nest accounts are dead. Nest privacy firewall is dead. You remember when Google acquired Nest, Tony Fadell famously said, don't worry, Google's not going to get your information. But there's also, of course, a Works with Nest program. And the Works with Nest program is going to be deprecated. In fact, here's the post on the Works with Nest site. It's winding down.
So here's what's going to happen. Google basically at Google I/O said it took Nest from a series of devices that have historically had their own intelligence and agency. So there was a direct API that lets you control them. It let Nest devices talk to your stuff and vice versa. By killing the Works with Nest program and switching it all through the Google Assistant and Google Home, what it's done is it's stuck the Google Home in as a middleman. So now think of the Nest devices as zombies. They are now controlled via the Google Home. And this is bad news for a lot of companies. It was sudden news for many companies. So every company out there that has done a Works with Nest integration now has to go back and basically build a routine through Google.
And that includes if this, then that.
It includes IFT. It includes Hue. It includes Lutron. It includes Amazon. Anybody who's been controlling their Amazon or their Nest thermostat through their Amazon Echo, Amazon has to work with Google now through this, and Amazon will get their own. It's not a skill; it's a routine or some sort of integration. So this isn't great. I mean, if you don't have a Google Home, you're going to be like, well, crap. Now I need some sort of home device from Google in my house to control my Nest devices.
You can't use your Android device, your Android phone?
Well, you can, but you can't do it when you're away because there's not a device there.
You need a hub at home. Okay, got it.
Yeah, that is my understanding. Now, I don't have my Nest stuff because I moved out, and so I've decommissioned all that. I can't play with this. Yeah. So if you're a person with Nest gear and you're like, what does this mean? Will I lose all functionality? You may lose some functionality. In June, you're going to be asked to switch over from a Nest account to a Google account. You shouldn't do that yet, though, because you have until the end of August.
August 31st, 2019.
And I would wait for the integrations that matter to you for those companies to actually announce that they've completed them and tested them, because otherwise you're going to kill functionality without being able to recreate it just yet.
That's not good.
Stacey, will you, presuming everybody goes through this, IFT will work again, these things will work again, they just, once they go through the effort?
Yes, everybody has to go through this effort. And the reason why Google did this is because now it has greater control over what devices access your Nest gear. Beforehand, I was accessing my Nest gear through like IFT and Amazon and all of these other things. And I would sometimes stop those connections, and then other things would still try to. It was kind of a security challenge, and it's a privacy challenge. So in relation to this, Google actually announced a privacy program for their smart home sensor products. And I have a lot of thoughts on this. So we'll get into that next, but ask me any more questions about Works with Nest.
In general, is this a good and necessary thing or a greedy and horrible thing?
It's both.
Like life.
Like life. There's two. I mean, yes, it's going to allow Google you'll have one place to go for privacy information and to understand what devices have access to what data. Because beforehand, Google couldn't tell you who had access to your Nest thermostat. You went through Nest and some things still worked, some things didn't. It was all iffy, and Google couldn't control the ecosystem. The flip side is Google couldn't control the ecosystem. And a lot of people like that, because they want to feel like they're in control of the ecosystem.
Got it.
What about privacy, though? Aren't some people concerned that now the firewall between Google and Nest is breached?
I mean, the fact that they had the firewall from the deal in 2013 when it was announced, or was it 2013 or 2014 that it closed?
I don't know.
So the fact that it's lived for this long is actually really impressive. And what Google's done is they're not using this. Okay, and here's where we get, and I wrote about this, so feel free to link to my story on Google's privacy thing. Google put out a privacy policy dedicated to sensor devices, and in it did some really great things. It said, hey, here's all of our devices, here's all the sensors in it, here's the data those sensors collect, which is something I think everything should do. And then it said, we're not going to use the data collected by those things for advertising. And it was very clear on this. Some of that data, all of the sensor home data, is not going to be used for advertising. Now, that's good. That's what a lot of people are worried about. It is not the end-all, be-all, because advertising is for the web, and this is the smart home. The data they're collecting is going to be valuable, not necessarily for advertising, although it could be used. Like if they wanted to go
indirectly might be used for advertising too.
It doesn't matter.
Right? You know?
Advertising is not the big thing we need to worry about here. What we need to worry about is having algorithmically generated decisions made for us for prices we pay for goods, things like insurance, access to healthcare or access to services, and that Google isn't talking about at all in their privacy policy. They're just like, yeah, we're going to keep this data. We're not going to show it to other people, so we're not going to share it. We're not going to show you advertising based on it. So everyone's like, oh, good, dodged a bullet. But really, they're not saying that we're not going to use this to build services and products.
Right.
And those services and products could end up putting a consumer in kind of a bad spot.
Well, give us just one potential scenario.
So, let's say Google has all this information now about the devices in my home. They could come in and say, hey, would you like electricity service from us? We can use this data to provide a more competitive rate, which sounds really good. But then once they have that competitive rate, how are they going to behave? Does anyone else have that access to data? Can they offer a similar product?
We know when you're home. We know when you're not home.
Right.
And of course, we're going to save you money by turning down your AC.
So
we know
in the beginning,
you're cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Right. It creates the same sort of monopoly effect or duopoly possibly effect that like the cable and ISP providers have by virtue of owning the pipe. By owning access to our smart home data, if it's a single company who has that, they can build all kinds of competitive services on top of that no one else can touch. And that's one example. Another example might be Google could start like a healthcare brokerage, health insurance brokerage, and start.
Yeah. We have to stop thinking that the hazard is that these companies are going to share our private information with third parties, because that's one of the hazards, but it's not the only hazard.
And we have to stop thinking about the only hazard as being advertising. The web was built on advertising. We're building something that isn't the web. We're building the Internet of Things, and that is going to be you're going to have data-based services.
So the hazard, let's be clear, is in the eye of the beholder. You may love your low-priced electric service. It's just a question of whether you are informed enough to make a good choice.
Yeah, you may love it until there is no other choice, and then they jack up the prices.
There's that too.
Yes. The problem with monopoly is not that it doesn't provide great service, but that by virtue of having a monopoly, you eliminate the elasticity of supply and demand pricing.
The step before the monopoly, and you may never get to monopoly. What I think I hear Stacey saying is that it's not a question of a monopoly. It's a question of you live in an ecosystem where you have limited information. There may be 10 other competitors. You don't know about them.
Well, you have both limited information, and then they have built a wall of data basically around you that it becomes impossible to leave. It's kind of like what people are talking about when they're talking about regulating Facebook, and like they're talking about like friend portability.
Apple's doing this too. Every company seems to be moving into this idea of siloing you. And creating a walled garden that is, that works well.
Yes, it'll be wonderful. It'll be highly customized for you. There's benefits and drawbacks to that, depending on how you feel about the world. But at the end of the day, it's a very dystopian vision, and I don't think we want that. I would like to keep the competitive, the barrier to the. Yeah.
It's the same argument people give against the smart city that Google's building in Toronto. It's not that a smart city won't have better commute, better bus service, better electrical service. It's that it will all be owned by one company. You're suddenly in the company town,
Well, there it's also what is Google going to do with that data, and how are they going to charge for access to that data for both cities and people and privacy and blah, blah, blah.
I, for one, am building an ark to take me to Google Island. 40 cubits by 80 cubits.
You might be there by default. You may not have much
Jeff,
that's fine.
There's also a short-term pain point, which is that anybody who has configured an elaborate smart home, you're lucky, Stacey, you just took yours apart.
So you're going to have to reconfigure it.
You're going to have to start all over again, all your scripts, all your automated routines and everything. But the good news is they're pulling off the Band-Aid. Once you move into the nice warm embrace of the Google bath, you won't have to ever leave it.